We're so glad you joined us for this week's message from Anchor Chapel in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Our prayer is that you're encouraged and challenged in your relationship with Jesus. Be blessed as you listen to this week's message.
Man, I'm excited about today because it's one of the things that I find is really challenging to me is talking about how do we navigate a world that is so easily offended, and it's so easy today to get offended. Now, that's not necessarily new, and it's not necessarily something unique that's happening in culture that makes us more offended. It's been in us all the time. But if you can make a decision to walk around offended and let those things pile up in your lives to where you end up having baggage, to where you can't have a real good relationship with somebody because you're always looking out for how they're going to offend you, or you can set yourself free. And I believe really that freedom and that relational breathing room we're talking about, it's in your hands. If you find yourself getting stressed out from relationships, you can do something about it today. I don't know if you've heard this, but recently the new iPhones got released or got announced, and Apple is releasing 3 new iPhones right now, okay? And there's basically 3 different screen sizes. Well, I saw an article the other day, and forgive me if I'm completely missing this, but I just don't see it. But I saw this article the other day where women are saying, some women, not all women, some women are saying that the new iPhone is sexist because it's too big. The new iPhone Plus is too big for a woman's hand. And I'm like, they make smaller ones, right? I'm like, I'm missing this. Hold on. How is it sexist that somebody who wants a bigger phone can have a bigger phone and someone who likes a smaller phone can have a smaller phone? I don't see it. I don't understand. I'm reading this article and I'm trying really hard to have compassion because I do have bigger hands. But I'm reading this and I'm like, are you serious? Why are people getting offended about the size of a device? How in the world did we get to this place that we're so mad and we're so easily offended, we're so frustrated that the size of a device that is such a gift and is so capable of so many things can make people frustrated, can make people upset. I'm like, I don't see this, but and you've seen relational things happen in your life that people get frustrated with you, or you get frustrated with things, if you're honest with yourself, that are just really ridiculous. And I think that we need to be a people, and if you're going to have relational breathing room, we need to be a people that have a little more grace, that have a little bit more of a spirit like Jesus had, that we're not so upset and frustrated about all the little things that can happen in our life. We live in it's an extremely offended culture. And I think that here's one of the key things is that no relationship is going to be healthy that is built of self-serving individuals. If you're in any relationship for yourself and thinking about how this other person should be serving you better, you'll never be happy. You'll never be satisfied. You'll always be frustrated. But we need to be a people who are not self-serving, but are people who think, I want to serve others. And I guarantee you, when you have a spirit that you want to serve other people, every relationship gets a little more breathing room. You get a little bit more peace in every relationship. So I want to there's really 2 main points I want you to get today. I'm going to start off right off the bat with the first one. Here's the first thing that I want to talk about for the majority of today. Relational breathing room comes when you forgive. Relational breathing room comes when you forgive. We have to learn how to forgive. When I moved to Baton Rouge, there was a student who called me up, and he was in our student ministry years ago. And he called me up and he said, hey, I want to get coffee with you. He had moved here to Baton Rouge a couple years before, and I get coffee with him, and he says, hey, I just wanted to meet with you to let you know that I forgive you. And I was like, for what? I could not think of what. I had no idea what he was talking about. And I'm like, look, I know. Last week we talked about emotional breathing room and how I can be a fairly cold individual sometimes. I'm not the sweetest and I kind of like confrontation. That's kind of my attitude towards a lot of things. So I know I probably did something to this guy. But he's like, I just wanted you to know, I wanted to meet with you and let you know I forgive you. And I was starting to chuckle. When something's so funny that you're like, man, this thing is showing on my face and I'm about to start laughing. But I was thinking in this moment, I was like, take it serious, take it serious. Something meant something to him. This was a big deal to him that for years he held this. And I was thinking okay, if you could flip the script here a little bit, and I think I might have told him this, I was like, man, I'm sorry for whatever it was that happened and that you had to carry it this long. We could have talked about this a long time ago. And I was just thinking all those years that happened, that unforgiveness ate him up. It did not eat me up. I did not care. I didn't even know what he was talking about. Like it was something that he needed to deal with, that he needed to get right. And even though I did apologize and I said, listen, he brought the thing up and I can't remember what it was exactly. It was just something about being rude or whatever. And I was just like, man, I'm sorry about that. And we made it right. But I thought you've suffered for 4 years or whatever it was, and I haven't. That's what unforgiveness does in us. That if you want relational breathing room, you've got to learn to forgive. Because that person may never come to you for forgiveness. And will you let their response and even though they've wronged you, will you let the way they respond ruin your future and ruin your spirit and and rob the breathing room from your life? That's just unwise. That's not what we're called to do. We're called to forgive whether or not the person comes to you and asks for it. This is what Jesus did. When you think about what Jesus did on the cross for us, like he went before us and he forgave us before we even sinned, before we even did what we needed to be forgiven for. He started with forgiveness. And this is where relational breathing room starts. We've got to start with forgiveness. And some of you today, you're already frustrated. You don't like it because you're like, man, this person did this thing to me. You know, I think that Jesus had every right to be offended and to be justified in his offense, that we did sin against him. But he didn't act like it. And I think that if we're going to develop a spirit of Jesus in our relationships, that it doesn't matter, even if that person owes you, and you have every right to be justified in your offense, it's not the spirit of who Jesus is. That we learn to forgive even when it doesn't make any sense. Even when it doesn't make sense to do it, that's just who we are. And I think that, if you look at culture today, we care about justice. We do. As long as it benefits us and doesn't cost us much. But if it's going to cost us something, we have a tendency to think that's not that big of a deal. But forgiveness is costly. Let's look at what Scripture says in Luke 17. Luke 17, Jesus is talking about this spirit of forgiveness. He says, so watch yourselves. And he just talked about causing someone young in the faith to stumble. He says, so watch yourselves. And then he says this, if another believer sins, rebuke that person. Go to them. Talk to them about the offense. And then if there's repentance, forgive. Even if that person wrongs you 7 times a day, and in each time turns again and asks for forgiveness, you must forgive. He talks about this spirit of forgiveness, that it doesn't matter how many times this person wrongs you, but this is what I've come to do. I've come to establish a different world, a different view, a different kingdom, one of grace and forgiveness, that even when it seems like you're so justified, that person continues to hurt me, you continue to forgive. And when I talk about forgiveness, I'm not talking about staying in an abusive relationship. That's just a different thing. If you're in an abusive relationship, do what you can to get out of it and get help. And that's not what we're talking about today. Outside of that, in relationships, we need to learn to forgive. And there's not an end to the forgiveness. There's not a number, there's not an amount that somebody can offend you so much to where you're like, oh, well, now you've reached the limit. I mean, it says right here in the Bible, it's just a math thing, really. It's not about my heart. It's just math. It's not like that. But there's a spirit of forgiveness constantly. Forgiveness is necessary in any relationship. Brooke and I have been married almost 19 years. Come on, man. And that means that we've had a lot of opportunity to forgive. So we went to Colorado a couple of weeks ago, and we just took a great week of Sabbath, taking a break out there. And one of the things that I've been wanting to do all this year, one of my hobbies is photography. And I've wanted to all year long learn how to take a photo of the Milky Way. So I've go to Colorado and I'm thinking, well, it's beautiful out there. There's a lot more dark skies. So I'm going to try to take a Milky Way photo. So the first night we show up, we end up in a place called Garden of the Gods. And I take a couple of long exposure shots and you can see some stars out at night. And it's a really cool, you can see like some really cool photos it was like pitch black there, but through the magic of long exposures, you can take a photo that reveals a lot more than what you can see. But the Milky Way wasn't visible. You couldn't really see it. So we had to go and try to find somewhere else. So while I'm out here, Brooke's texting me, and she's like, okay, we got to move through this or whatever. So we wait till the next night. so the next night I decide, well, I'm going to go to a place that has a rating. There's like an app that tells you how dark the sky is. I was super nerdy about this, y'all. So like I find this app that tells me like where the darkest spot is. And I go to a place called the Painted Mines. And if you haven't been in the area, it's basically a canyon that used to be like a salt mine, I believe it was, and it's just beautiful down, but it's like these canyons that you walk into, and it's just pitch black out there. There's nothing going on. So the first night we're in our hotel, and we can hear the coyotes start to howl in the hotel. And in the hotel, in the safety of the hotel, it was really cool. And it was like, man, you can hear these coyotes. They got something, and they're all like calling each other to come and eat the roadkill or whatever they found. And I was like, that was fun. Well, the night that I was at the paint mine shooting, I started to hear them again, and it wasn't quite as fun. So we drive up to the place. So let me backtrack just a little bit. We drive up to the paint mines. And it's so dark, I turn off the headlights in the car, and I step out of the car, and I look up in the sky, and with my naked eye, I can see the Milky Way. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but it's beautiful. It's so amazing. So I tell Brooke and Brooklyn to get out of the car, and I'm like, you've got to see this. Just look at it. It's amazing. Judah had fallen asleep because it was about an hour drive outside of where we were. So Judah's in the car sleeping, Brooklyn's in the back seat, and Brooke's in the front, and I say, babe, I'm going to just run down here and grab the photo. I'll be right back, okay? We're in the middle of nowhere. So my right back quickly turned into 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 35 minutes, 45 minutes. And I'm down here with a flashlight in my camera. And I'm like, I had taken a little tripod for the camera, and the camera wouldn't stand up on the tripod. So I take my shoes off, and I'm walking around the bottom of this canyon trying to prop up my camera just right on my shoes and all to get this ridiculous shot, right? So I'm down there, and I try to call Brooke just to let her know, hey, I'm okay. But I had no idea how long I'd been down there. No service. I have no service. So I have no idea she's trying to reach out to me at the time that I'm down there. So I'm down there, and I'm just thinking about the shot. I'm just thinking, do the thing. And she's thinking, I might have fallen and died. So she tells Brooklyn, while I'm in the car, she tells Brooklyn, there's a possibility that your dad has fallen and hurt himself. She's like preparing Brooklyn. Brooklyn's in the back seat, and she's starting to like, my dad, I can't lose, like she's starting to freak out. And so Brooke ends up getting like, she's like, trying to prepare her, but then Brooke starts to get real frustrated, and she tells Brooklyn, if he hasn't fallen and hurt himself, I will hurt him when he gets back. I have no idea this is going on. I start taking the photos, and I'm trying to get the right shot. I finally get the right angle, and all of a sudden, I start hearing, I start hearing these dogs, right? And I'm like, oh, that's, a couple dogs by a house that might be out here. Well, they get closer, and I'm like, man, that's a big yard that they came across, because I heard the noise, and I'm starting to panic. And I remember the first night the coyotes were there, and people were talking about like, you got to be careful when you're out. And I'm just like, oh man, I'm starting to hyperventilate too. So I'm trying to rush and put my shoes on. I'm running out, and I'm running up this canyon with like the light going around. I'm looking for like the eyes, like in the cartoons that you would just see like watching you to eat you. So I finally make it up there, and Brooks got the headlights on, the cars are running, all this stuff. And like the thing about a Milky Way photo is it's got to be pitch black. So Brooke was like, I'm going to keep the headlights off and make sure I don't ruin the shot or whatever. I'm so far away it didn't matter, but we didn't know. So I get back, and she's like, what were you doing? I almost came down there to look for you. I thought you died. And Brooklyn's like, Daddy. And I'm like, I come back to the car. I have no idea what's going on. I finally check my phone, and this is what I see in the text messages. So the first night this was the first couple nights, kids were a little anxious. So I tell her last shot, how much longer? So I go back to the car. And then somewhere in the middle of the day, I asked her where my sandals were. The next day, I'm shooting at the Milky Way. She says, text me every 10 minutes so I know you're okay. And then a little bit later, I'm starting to panic. You need to call or text pronto. And then finally, this is how she threatens me. If you don't text, I'm putting the headlights on. I'm like, this tells us a lot about our relationship. Like, she's going to ruin the shot. Like, this is how she's going to get at me. So I'm like, this is like the weirdest story to me, because I had one experience of it. She had a completely different experience of it. And that's really what happens in relationships. That like the reason you feel like you need to forgive or don't want to forgive is because your experience meant something so much different than that person's experience. Just like that guy who said that he forgave me and I had no idea that I needed to be forgiven. Like this is what forgiveness does. Your perspective, where you're the one who needs to forgive, you're the one getting eaten up. You're the one that stuff is tearing you up on the inside. And by the way, if you're wondering, I did end up getting a Milky Way shot, and it worked out kind of cool. I mean, learned a little bit on my first one, but it was amazing to be a part of that. But here's the thing about forgiveness. No matter how long you're in relationship with somebody, there never comes a time where you don't have to forgive anymore. There never comes a time where you just like know each other so well. Even the older couples in here can tell you, there's times when we still have to forgive. There's times when we still have to. That's why you hear about marriages that last for 30 years and then they get divorced. Like there's something that just couldn't click anymore. That there's something in them, there's something that couldn't be forgiven anymore. And there's a split. And you just wonder why that stuff happens, but there needs to be a spirit of forgiveness. And here's one of the things I think just is totally your South Louisiana way of saying this, but I thought about this week. If you never need to forgive nobody, you don't know nobody. If you never need to forgive, like you live in your room by yourself, and you're not even online. Like every relationship is going to require that you learn how to forgive, that you learn how to show grace, even when it is one of the most difficult things. And here's the cost of forgiveness. The cost of forgiveness is simple. It's pride. But that's one of the most costly things that we have. It's one of the things that we want to hold on to. When somebody does me wrong, I will lose my pride. If I just let them walk all over me, I'm going to be letting them know that I am weak. We have all these little things. We have all these little concerns. I don't want them to know that I can be trampled on. I don't want them to know that I'm not somebody strong and I can defend myself. Like we have all these things, and all it's really pride. The reason we don't forgive is because of pride. But grace understands that it's not about me, but I'm here to love other people. I think that if we have a tendency to think we don't need to forgive anyone, then that also means that we think we're better than them. And you need forgiveness just as much as the person who's wronged you needs forgiveness. Sometimes we forget that we've needed forgiveness too. Look at what Mark 11 says. Jesus is talking to his disciples. It says in verse 22, then Jesus said to his disciples, have faith in God. I tell you the truth, you can say to this mountain, be lifted up and thrown into the sea, and it will happen. But you must really believe it will happen, and have no doubt in your heart. I tell you, you can pray for anything, and if you believe that you've received it, it will be yours. But when you're praying, because that first part of that, what Jesus is saying, I can do anything? I can do anything. I can pray and you'll do it. That sounds amazing. That's the kind of Christian I want to be. But this is what he says. But when you're praying, first forgive anyone you are holding a grudge against, so that your Father in heaven will also forgive your sins. Isn't it amazing? Like sometimes we go through life and we think, I want to grow. I want to know God. I want to be a super powerful Christian. I want to be a powerhouse Christian. If you want to be super spiritual, learn to forgive people. Jesus says the first order of importance here is not that you would do great things and miracles, but that you would look like I looked on the cross, because that is the ultimate message that I came to deliver. That you would be a person of grace and forgiveness, more than this super spiritual superhero Christian that's just known for the signs and wonders that follow them. Are you known for the grace and mercy that follows you? Are you known for the forgiveness and the fact that you reach people and love people right where they are, even when they harm you? Even when they hurt you? That's what it means to look like Jesus. And those things, all of this should happen. We should be people that the signs and wonders of God follow us. That there should be a clear mark that we are different from the rest of the world, and that the supernatural power of God is alive in our life. But the number one priority has always been that we would learn to be gracious and learn to forgive. That's what Jesus is telling us to do. He's saying, listen, you've got to be the kind of person that understands the order of importance is forgiveness first, and then it's all the other stuff. Here's kind of not really the second thing, but just a main point I want you to get today. If you want to see breakthrough, break through your own grudge first. If you want to see breakthrough in your life, break through your own grudge first. Meaning, some of us are asking God to do these great miracles. We're asking God to do something special and unique and something big, something magnanimous in our life. And we're praying for all these big things. And he's saying, I just want you to forgive your wife. I just want you to be gracious to that coworker. I just want you to forgive that person who's harmed you. If you can start there, then I'll reward with the other things. Because you've got to understand the first reason that I came was grace. It's forgiveness. It's that people would see the mercy of Jesus in every conversation in your life. That's what we're called to be. 2 Corinthians 2, Is this crazy example that Paul is writing to the church, and apparently the story is that somebody had hurt somebody in the church. And this happens in every church. So many people come to a new church like ours that, our church is called a church plant, a church that starts off brand new. But so many people come to churches that start off new, angry at the last church they left. And they come to a new place thinking that will be the answer for all my problems. This pastor hurt me. This pastor didn't pay attention to me. This person did this. So I'm going to come to this new place that's going to fix all my problems. And it doesn't take long before you realize Pastor Josh didn't remember my name. He didn't, whatever, or somebody in the church forgot to include me in this event or whatever. You're going to get offended here too. And we're going to try really hard to make sure that you feel welcome and loved. We talk about this all the time with our team, but we're going to drop the ball sometimes. And if the spirit of your life is that you're always looking for somebody else to give you the peace that you're hungry for, that you're looking for, then you're always going to be looking. You're always going to be searching because somebody's going to hurt you every day. All the time. They're always going to hurt you. The peace comes from God, not from somebody else. Not from somebody else doing it right or coming to you for forgiveness, but the peace comes from us just trusting God with every part of our life. God, you know what they did was wrong, and it hurts, but I'm going to trust you. And this is what Paul is finding himself in the middle of. Somebody hurt the Corinthian church. And he says this in verse 5. He's very sympathetic about it. He says, I'm not overstating it when I say that the man who caused all the trouble hurt all of you more than he hurt me. Most of you have opposed him, and that was punishment enough. Now, however, it is time to forgive and comfort him. Otherwise, he may be overcome by discouragement. Isn't it funny when somebody won't forgive you? When you do everything that you can to try to restore that relationship and that person won't forgive, it's one of the most discouraging things in the world. And I wonder how many times we keep people away from our churches, from relationship with God, because we don't want to show forgiveness. He says, verse 8, so I urge you now, reaffirm your love for him. In verse 10, jump ahead, he says, when you forgive this man, I forgive him too. And when I forgive whatever needs to be forgiven, I do so with Christ's authority for your benefit, so that Satan will not outsmart us. For we are familiar with his evil schemes. I believe that what Paul is trying to say is that forgiveness is the vessel through which hope arrives. Now, we're a church that we say hope for every soul all the time. That means that we have to be a church that is about forgiveness. If we are not a people that's about forgiveness, there is no avenue for hope to arrive. If we're going to be a people who love people, we have got to learn to forgive. It's necessary. It is part of it. That is one of the only ways that real love is actually shown in relationship. If you can't forgive, if everything's going right and everything's going perfect, it's easy to love somebody. But when they've hurt you, can you love them? Can you love them enough to forgive? This is the spirit of who Jesus is that he's a forgiver, that he forgives us. And I love what Paul says. He says, we don't want to be tricked by Satan. We are aware of his schemes. Satan wants you to be so justified. They hurt me so much, I will never trust them again. Now, forgiveness is not the same thing as trust. But some of us think that I've got to give them another shot and let them completely in and all. Forgiveness is letting the weight off of your heart and saying, I'm going to trust you with it, God. There might be some avenues where this person has to regain my trust, but I'm going to try as hard as I can to restore this relationship. But what the enemy wants you to do is he wants you to feel justified, and he wants you to feel wronged, and he wants you to feel bitter, and he wants you to get all offended and let that thing begin to grow in you and just begin to take over your life. But I love what Paul says. We're aware of the schemes. Here's what I want to challenge you to practically. When you feel offended, think right away, or look for the offense in your life. Look right away for the offense. Why am I offended at this post that this person posted? Why am I offended at the way that text ended? That they just put a period instead of an exclamation point. They didn't put the emojis. So like you could read into silly things and think like this person must be mad. They must be frustrated. Look at the reason you're offended, and I want you to recognize it for what it is. Satan wants to fool you. And how many Christians, how many of us see and have things happen to us, and we fall for it all the time, and we act just like the devil. And we just will deny and not allow people to have forgiveness because they wronged me. That is not the spirit of Jesus. But Satan wants to cause us to think that person owes us something. And here's the second thing I want you to get. We talked about forgiveness. Forgiveness is one thing, but I think this is even more difficult. But if you can do this, you won't have to forgive as much, or it'll be much easier to do so. Relational breathing room comes when you lead with grace. When you lead with grace. And here's why I say this. Grace is not just a response. Grace is something we are called to lead with. Grace is something that we should go into every relationship and every conversation and every encounter with people. We should lead with grace. We think about what the Bible says about Jesus. It says that Jesus, actually before the foundations of the earth in 1 Peter 1:20, it says that God chose him long before the world began, but now in these last days he's been revealed for your sake. Meaning that the grace of God, the plan of God went before the forgiveness. The grace of God, like he led with grace. He led with the idea that I will be offended, I will be hurt, I will create mankind in my image, and I've got a perfect plan for them, and I know they're going to walk away from it. But I've got a plan, and his name is Jesus, and he's going to die on their behalf so that I can know them again, so that they could feel welcome, so that they would be restored. The plan of God, the grace of God, was that he would always lead with grace. He wasn't like looking for grace like it was like, oh man, what do I do now? They've messed up. They've like we went to the airport whenever we were going to Colorado, and our kids like, oh, I got to show you this picture of my kids like with their suitcases. Isn't that cute? And they were like carrying their own bags. But we show up at the at TSA. And I'm the kind of person that's like, I'm not going to delay the line at all. So I've got the ticket out and ready. And I'm like, here's the ticket. Here's my license. Everybody's ready. I'm talking to Brooke. I'm like, which kid do you want? She's like, does it matter? Like, we'll just figure it out as we get there. I'm like, no, we got to be ready. We got to be ready. I've got to have the ticket out so I can go through the line as quick as possible. And I think there's a difference between, obviously it would slow down the line if I had my ticket way in my bag and I got out to TSA and they're like, license and ticket. And I'm like, oh yeah, hold on a second. Let me get, was it in your bag? Was it in my bag? Wasn't it? And we're looking for it. And I think that's how many of us respond with grace, that we're like, oh man, I got to show grace. Oh man, I got it. And where is that? I've got it somewhere in this bag of Christian living. I got it somewhere in here. I don't know if I read a book about this recently. How do I show this? And you're like, we're digging for grace when it's not meant to be at the bottom of the bag. Grace is meant to be in the front, in your hand, that I'm coming with it. I'm leading with it. Grace is always right here. It's going to be the way that I approach every relationship. And I'm not saying this so that you can walk into every relationship all jaded and be like, Sam's going to hurt my feelings. That's not, some people are like, they don't give people a chance. They're like, I just know him. I just know he looks so great. He's doing so, it seems like he's up to something. He can't be that nice. And like some people have that attitude, like that ain't Christ either. But the spirit and the attitude, like I was thinking about Josh Foster this week, and I didn't like ask him about this because I probably should have, because I don't know much about baseball. But like he runs like these pitching, what do you call them? Like camps and workouts and all with these pitchers. And I'm sure that at some point for advanced pitchers, he teaches them how to throw a curveball. Now I've always thought like the curveball was the most obvious sign that there was a deceiver on the planet, because I used to play baseball when I was in high school, and like if a pitcher would throw a curveball, I'd be like, nope, I ain't even got a chance at this thing. And like I'm the kind of person, I played baseball and I'm pretty good in the field, but I was so bad at bat that they wouldn't even let me play in the field. You got to like kind of do both, like you're not just a fielder, you got to do both. So like I would go to the batting cage, and like if the batting cage, like how they have like different miles per hour that you can hit, like if it was over 40, I'd be like, oh no, I'm out. That thing is coming so fast. I just was like so scared of the ball. So like to me, it is a miracle of God that somebody can hit a curveball. To me, like that is a modern day miracle. If you can hit a curveball, that is amazing. Okay, I'm just blown away if you know how to hit a curveball. But people know how to do it, and the reason that they know how to do it is that they can anticipate and they can see. The crazy thing is, like in the MLB, like whenever a pitcher throws the ball, that ball is coming so fast. You have to basically you just have to anticipate where you think that's going to be in order for you to hit it. Am I right, Josh? Is that true? He's like, you get it all wrong. I'm just going to nod yes so that you get this message over with. But I'm like, but I was thinking, like, how people use the phrase, like, man, that was a curveball. They threw me a curveball. Well, like, what grace does? Grace enables you to take every curveball and be able to still hit it, and still be able to work with it. And it's not a spirit of, oh man, he threw me a curveball, I'm not playing baseball anymore, and like throw the bat down and leave the field. Like that would be ridiculous. But instead, a baseball player will try as hard as he can. I'm going to learn how to hit a curveball. And I think that so many of us, we get so frustrated when somebody throws us a curveball. The person that you thought you were going to spend the rest of your life with, they threw you a curveball. Oh, it's not going to work out. Like, what if we led with grace to where we thought, you know what, that person's going to make a few mistakes, and I'm going to lead with grace instead of be digging in the bag for grace. Where is it? And I love the spirit of this. Even Paul writes about this in Colossians 3, verse 13, and in Ephesians, we'll see in a second. He says this in verse 13, make allowance for each other's faults and forgive anyone who offends you. Remember, the Lord forgave you, so you must forgive others. And the picture I see here is that we have hope in one hand for each person, and we have grace in the other. And we are hoping that this person will learn and grow and mature, and we have hope and we're praying for them, but we have grace just in case they don't. Just in case they hurt me, I have grace in the other hand. I'm ready for it. So I'm hoping and believing for the best that you will respond in a good way, and that this relationship on both sides can be clicking on all cylinders. But if it doesn't, I'll have grace for you. I'll have mercy for you. So it's not just, relationships don't acquire breathing room just from forgiveness, but we need to learn to lead with grace as well. We need to be people who learn to lead with grace. I'm going to ask the band to come up, and I'll close in a couple of minutes. I was thinking, this is one of those messages that you could easily be sitting here and thinking, man, I wish that they were here to hear this one. I wish so-and-so was here to hear this one. And they might hear it later. That's what we put it online for. But is God speaking to you today about forgiveness and grace? Because I know that he speaks to me about this all the time. And there are things that happen to me on a regular basis that I could get offended about, that I could be frustrated about, that I could let my justification about how I did the right thing and they did the wrong thing, I could let that rule my life. And I get mad, I could get frustrated, or I could understand, you know what? This is an opportunity for me to be more like Jesus. Because the most like Jesus we can be is whenever we're forgiving, whenever we're showing grace. And if you need relational breathing room today, maybe it's not that other person needs to get their stuff together. Maybe it's that you need to lead with grace. Maybe it's that you need to learn to forgive even when it doesn't seem like they deserve it. One last verse in Ephesians 4, verse 2, Paul is kind of saying the same thing about the allowance. He says, always be humble and gentle. He's saying, don't be prideful, but instead be humble and gentle. Be patient with each other, making allowance for each other's faults because of your love. If our church can have a spirit of humility and grace, it doesn't matter what happens between us. We can continue to love. We can continue to show mercy. We can continue to, I think one of the things that ends up happening in churches, especially smaller ones, is whenever there are rifts between people, you end up seeing churches that end up splitting. And nothing like that has happened in our church to the degree that we couldn't pray through it and the team was really behind it. We've had a couple of things that have happened that people have been unforgiving. And I just see I see the spirit of it. And I would pray today that we would learn to be people who are forgiving and people who lead with grace. This is what my heart is. And this is what I want to be. Because I will be honest with you, this message was really hard for me. When I was reading these scriptures, sometimes as you grow in maturity, some scriptures are like, man, that is life. Even though it was hard for me at one time, that's life to me. But this is still hard for me sometimes. This is difficult because you feel like you do the right things and you love people well and you go out of your way for people, and then they have their own mind and they do their own thing, and you're like, what? You don't get to do what you wanted to do? I loved you, man. I prayed for you. I did all. And somebody still does what they want to do? That's what it means to be human. That's what it means to follow Christ, is that when other people wrong us, we still love them. We still reach them. So I don't know what your story is today, but I would pray today that God would teach us to be people who forgive and people who show grace. And if you can say amen to that, then good, let's continue to do it. But if you can't, let's pray that God would help us to be able to say it one day. Maybe even this afternoon. Maybe the Spirit of God will change your heart even now so that you can begin to restore what the enemy's tried to destroy. And maybe you feel completely justified at this point, that you've been wrong so much that you deserve to be frustrated, you deserve to be mad, and maybe you do deserve it. But we didn't deserve the grace of Jesus, and he gave it to us anyway. And this is what it means to follow him, that we follow him to the cross, that we lay down our offenses, we lay down our pride, we lay down all the things that people did to us, and you will never identify more with Jesus than when you're forgiving. And that's what he's asking us to do today.
Thank you for joining us for this week's message from Anchor Chapel. If you'd like to support the ministry of Anchor Chapel, you can easily do so on our website at anchorchapel.com or follow us on social media at Anchor Chapel. God bless. We'll see you next week.